Sahar, tell us how Addameer was set up as an organization.
Actually, the idea of finding an organization specified for prisoners came in the first Intifada, actually, at the latest years of the first Intifada back in 1991, when Israel was arresting thousands of prisoners and there were no special organizations offering free legal aid for the prisoners or the families. Ex-prisoners who were released from prison and activists and lawyers in Jerusalem decided to found Addameer, and this is how Addameer was registered under the Israeli authorities in Jerusalem in December 1991 as a non-profit company, and they started to hire lawyers and to give legal aid for the prisoners and families of prisoners in the Israeli military courts and civil courts in Jerusalem and in the occupied territories. They started based on voluntary work. Most of the lawyers that they were recruiting, they were volunteering and getting minimum charge for costs, mostly for travel costs and such things. And then the organization was developing by the years to include more projects like documentation of torture and ill treatment, issuing studies and reports and doing advocacy based on the material that they were collecting. And this is how we ended up like today, one of the organizations that continued to work in the prisoners' cases for all these years, but we also included the PA aspect, the Palestinian Authority. When they were established, unfortunately, they also were arresting people for political reasons, and the Addameer started to follow cases and torture cases as well in the Palestinian Authority side.
So Addameer has been there for around more than 20 years. Do you think the last couple of years has made a change, significant change on the political prisoners issue in Israel occupied territories?
I would say that the critical point was the Oslo time, the Oslo agreement. People before Oslo, the prisoners movement was very powerful. Political prisoners movement was very involved in the political process. And unfortunately, after Oslo, the fact that the Palestinian Authority failed to release all the political prisoners within the agreement, because according in the first Oslo agreement, there was no mentioning for the political prisoners, and it was left for the second agreement, the Washington Declaration, when Israel actually started to put conditions on the release of the prisoners and categorized them for old people, women, children, ill people, people who were arrested before Oslo and sentenced for life sentences or 10 years. And every time they were claiming that there's political tension or the PA didn't committed herself to the agreement, so they were freezing the release of the second group. And this is how we ended up starting the second Intifada with 1,500 political prisoners remaining in the Israeli prisons. From these people till now, there's 106 that they are arrested from before 1993 actually, and they are still there. The fact that they were not taken seriously in the agreement affected the whole movement. Also, the fact that the people believed in the first 7-8 years of the Oslo that peace is going to come, so all the political parties and the people changed their political attitude, their struggle attitude, and it also reached the prisons. So the prisoners as well stopped being the same as they used to be as a movement before Oslo. And then the second Intifada caused even more damage, I would say, to the whole movement, because then you would have security people who got to be arrested from the different security agencies in the PA structure, and these people are not politicized, they are not political members of any political party, they are members of a security agent, and they think differently, and even from the security point of view they think differently. So it affected also the interaction in between the prisoners, the different groups, the political parties, their daily life, and the relation between them and the Israeli prison authority. And this is why, for example, in 2004, when they wanted to get in hunger strike to demand their rights, it failed. After 17 days of hunger strike in 2004, they didn't guarantee anything, and the Israeli prison authority actually managed to defeat them by cheating, and they stopped their hunger strike without reaching any point. And this is very different from what we experienced in 2012, for example, in the hunger strike. And it took time till the prisoners' movement decided that we have to rebuild our internal interaction in order to face the violations that imposed on us on a daily basis by the prison authority.
The 2012 hunger strikes seem to have had a huge impact, both externally as well as internally in Palestine. Do you think that this, to us it appears, this is a really turning point in the prisoner struggles as well as making an effect also on the struggle against occupation? Do you think that this is something that that's happening on the ground?
Definitely. I just have to mention that the prisoners still played a very positive role in the division question after the break between Hamas and Fatah, and the fact that Hamas controlled Gaza and the PA here continued, and we didn't have the election. The prisoners drafted a document, political analysis, and they were referring it for both Hamas and Fatah, and they were demanding reconciliation, and they pushed a lot for the reconciliation process. And this was the beginning of us feeling that the political prisoners movement is working internally in restructuring itself as a movement that would have a role and power in the society. So then came the issue of the daily violations of their basic rights, especially the solitary confinement that was imposed on political leaders in the prisoners movement, and they decided to enter any hunger strike in September 2011. Actually they started, but it was stopped because of the exchange deal. They were not aware that the exchange would happen in October, so they decided to stop the hunger strike in order to see what the exchange deal will change in their reality, because most of the violations the Israeli prison authority was claiming it's related to the case of Shalit. All the time that Hamas is keeping Shalit underground without family visits, we will impose restrictions on the Palestinian prisoners. Shalit was released and nothing changed actually. The opposite, they continued with all the policies and the daily violations. So the prisoners decided to enter any hunger strike in April 2012. It was the Prisoners' Day, the 17th of April, when they started their hunger strike. And this was a collective hunger strike. Before April the 17th, individuals who were arrested under administrative detention, actually, like Khadir Adnan, Hana Shalabi, Bilal Dhiab, and Thair Halahli, decided to launch their own individual hunger strike, which was actually a very important new strategy by the Palestinian prisoners movement, because this was the first time that an individual enter in a hunger strike and he can reach 66 days or 75 days in a hunger strike. And they enforced the Israeli occupation forces. For example, in the administrative detention of Khadir Adnan, it was limited just for one order for 4 months. In the case of Bilal and Thair, they were released after a certain period. Unfortunately, in the case of Hana, the Israelis isolated Hana when she was in a hunger strike, and they enforced her to agree for 3 years deportation to Gaza. So in the case of Hana, it was ending in a bad way. Hana was actually subjected for sexual harassment in her first day of arrest, and she was released in the exchange deal after 2 years in administrative detention. She was fully aware about the harsh tool of administrative detention, and this is why she was really pressured in agreeing to the deportation at the end. And then the general movement entered in the hunger strike for more or less 1 month, and was also successful. They reached an agreement to end the isolation policy, to get back the family visits from Gaza, which was reactivated 3 months after. And currently there's just 2 prisoners still in solitary confinement. All the others, including leaders, political leaders like Ahmed Sadat and Musa, I forgot his first name, Mahmoud Isa, who were isolated for 10 years continuously. They were taken out for the general sections. So we can say that for some issues, the hunger strike was very effective, and the prison authority was enforced to agree for certain issues that the prisoners were demanding. Unfortunately, the individual hunger strikes that continued in the summer of 2012 until today, actually, it's not so effective as it used to be last year. The Israeli prison authority developed more policy of more restrictions, that they are not terrified as before that anyone would die very soon, so it will cause serious problems in the prison and in the international and in the outside level. So they are not taking seriously the demands of these individuals like Samer Isawi and Ayman Sharauni, who were rearrested after the exchange deal, because based on secret material, the Israelis claim that they violated the conditions of the release. So both of them, for example, they are now subjected for procedures in the military court. Both of them, they can get back all the remaining sentences that they were released from. In the case of Ayman, it's 28 years, and in the case of Samer, it's 20 years. And this is why they entered in a hunger strike. Unfortunately, just today we were aware that also Ayman was enforced to agree for deportation for 10 years to Gaza. So this shows how the Israeli prison authority actually is using this issue of hunger strike to pressure the prisoners to be deported to Gaza. For the Israelis now, Gaza is becoming the big prison that they deport people for, because in the exchange deal itself they enforced Hamas to agree that certain number of the prisoners would be deported to Gaza or deported outside the occupied territories. Some of them, they were deported to Jordan or Turkey or Syria. And deportation, according to the international law, is a crime, is a war crime, is illegal. And this is why we claim that even third state parties, when they agree to accept these Palestinian prisoners that Israel deporting, they are complicit with the occupation, although they are not directly have the intention for this criminal act of deportation. But unfortunately, this is the legal consequences of such policy.
So 2012, a lot of gains in terms of at least impact outside, as well as certain things that Israel was forced to concede. But now there is some going back on it, and things are not, some of these are not turning out as you would have expected. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, but we can say that the positive aspect of the hunger strike was very powerful, was very effective, because now we can see the fruits of this movement. For example, this week the European Parliament just issued a decision that they want to investigate more in the case of the Palestinian political prisoners, and they were demanding from Israel to respect the international law. And in the past, actually since 2008, they were trying to visit the prisons and to have their own investigating committee. Unfortunately, the Israeli side didn't allow them. So now we feel that there's more interest in the EU level the parliament and other groups. It was the first time that Ashton issues a statement against administrative detention, and as well the Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, also issued a statement against administrative detention. And it never happened before that such high position people would go against the policy of administrative detention if it wasn't after the hunger strike and the fact that it got coverage from very important media in the world, and also the activism in the different countries supporting the Palestinian political prisoners, especially those that they are subjected for administrative detention, I think also shared in this change that we are facing now. Hopefully that will expand more and will include more decision makers in more powerful countries like governments, that it will reach really the level of EU governments, that they will take more serious actions. For example, telling Israel that we will not upgrade the economical relations with Israel if you don't abide by international law. We know that it's not easy to reach, and we have to go a long way till we reach this point that the EU or other countries take really positive steps in order to support and protect Palestinian human rights issues.
On the issue of Palestinian human rights, political prisoners, administrative detention, etc., have you also tried to reach out to governments, for instance, South Africa, Brazil, India, countries which earlier used to take a lot more clear positions on the question of Israel and Palestine? Has any attempt been made to reach these governments, and any response from these governments?
Actually, on the level of South Africa and Brazil, I'm sure there was lots of work done. Unfortunately, on the level of India, specifically in the issue of political prisoners, we didn't reach such level. I think just the campaign of boycott, divestment, sanctions actually reached India in their advocacy and lobbying work, which mean that we as Palestinian NGOs, we need to have more contacts and to develop our networks in India in order to open this space that we can coordinate and cooperate with the local civil society in India in order to push more such cases of political prisoners, house demolitions, the wall, settlements, and other basic issues of Palestinian human rights that is of concern actually for us.
Actually, I wanted to go back to something you said earlier, because when you were talking about the question of reconciliation and the demands that the Palestinian prisoners have been making for unity, I was wondering if you could talk more about how the recent mobilization of Palestinian prisoners that I think you've mentioned, in terms of how they're trying to counter the divisions even within the prisoners movement and unifying across these faction lines, what is sort of interesting about that, because it seems to me that what you're saying is that the Palestinian prisoners movement has a significance for the larger national movement. So maybe you can tell us what happened recently in terms of some of these divides that they're trying to rebuild from within.
Mm-hmm. Actually, always the Palestinian political prisoners movement was very essential part of the whole Palestinian political movement in the 70s and the 80s and early 90s, even in the time of like in the time of the second election in 2006, when Hamas was elected and the EU and other states boycotted the Palestinian political process, and the prisoners came out with the draft of the unity government actually, and they were requesting both sides to reach a unity agreement. And the problem that after the clashes between Hamas and Fatah, the prison authority as well played a very bad role in dividing the prisoners internally in the prisons. Of course, the prisoners were affected by the division, and arguments also reached the prison, but the prison authority separated totally prisoners from Hamas from prisoners from Fatah in different prisons, in different sections, and they were playing a role in bringing more tension to the internal atmosphere in between the prisons. After, I think, couple of months, the prisoners were aware that this is very dangerous for our internal life, and this is actually intentionally done in order to affect our ability to resist the prison authority. It's all about, at the end, the Israeli prison authority wants to control us and to defeat us and to take out all the, because all the rights that they were guaranteeing all these years since the beginning of the occupation were after very massive struggle in the prisons, whether it's hunger strikes in the 70s or the 80s. People died in the 80s in the hunger strike, the long hunger strike of 1982, also in 1991. So prisoners were fighting all the years to guarantee their basic rights in the prison system. When they were aware that the prison system policy is to divide them in order to control them more and take out all the rights that they guaranteed, they were finally clever enough in order to sit and say, that's it, we have to unite. We have to think strategically together in order to face this reality. And also they reached a point, I think, that they are not much relying on the outside political parties or the Palestinian politics and how they can protect them. Also us as NGOs, because we had this discussion with them that what's the role of the NGOs, and that the NGOs is not actually guaranteeing their rights through the legal system. It was clear that in the last 5 years, through all these petitions to the Israeli High Court, in order to get some of these rights that they were confiscated, we didn't succeed. For example, in the family visits of the Gaza prisoners, that it was banned for 5 years, all the time that Shalit was under arrest. They canceled totally all the family visits from the Gaza area to inside Israel to the prisoners inside Israel. So we twice petitioned the High Court in this question, claiming that you cannot punish 750 prisoners with total ban in this way. And the High Court was saying, no, that's not a humanitarian issue. We are not going to interfere. And they kept the decision of the Israeli prison authority on the total ban. So the prisoners feel that it's not helping all these lobbying, advocacy, litigation, and all these. We are the main motivation for any change, and we have to take the responsibility. And this is why they were thinking what's the other tools that they can use in order to guarantee these issues. So they reached the point of a hunger strike because they exhausted all the other mechanisms before. And of course, this plan for the hunger strike was coordinated with the political parties, with the NGOs, because they were fully aware that without the support of the Palestinian street, with its all components, whether political parties, their families, the public, the general public, the NGOs, the media, they cannot survive, they cannot succeed. And this is why they started to have the dialogue with the outside to discuss the idea, what we are going to do, how we are going to do it. And this is actually, I think, will reflect in the future about them getting back to play a very important role in the Palestinian reality. Because this issue of the hunger strike and having this relation in the time of the hunger strike that they were leading, like we were visiting them and discussing with them what you want us as NGOs and civil society, in which ways we can support you. So they were, like in the case of Khadr Adnan, he was the only person to lead his campaign. He was the one who taking decisions when to take minerals, when to stop drinking water, when he would be transferred to the hospital, all these details that affected the campaign for him, he was taking role. And so I mean, this fact of the hunger strike, I think, helped a lot in restructuring the relation between the prisoners' movement and the outside.
Thank you very much. That's a very interesting interview.